reality and representation. Anything particular about neo? Neo means in Latin, or is it Greek? New. But it's also an anagram of one, the one. He plays a kind of Jesus figure. So Neo has an awakening, a similar awakening to Truman when Morpheus, that's the Lawrence Fishburne character, reveals to him that the real world is actually a simulated reality. So everything that, just like the Truman Show, we suddenly realize, oh my God, my whole world is mediated and simulated. It's called The Matrix, and it's been created by machines in order to enslave the human race. Well, that's a capitalist narrative right there. Neo is trapped within a capitalist system just as much as he is trapped within the computer system of the Matrix. Remember what I said to you before. Imagine a world without media. You'd be lost. We're all trapped in it. Yeah?
Yeah.
And that also reminds me of the division of the human brain. Which part of the brain thinks like a machine? And that's the internet, which we'll talk about next week. The Matrix lead character Neo is given the option of taking a red pill or a blue pill, which would enable him to understand what was actually occurring outside the illusion that's created by the Matrix. And that's the one that he takes. He takes the red one. Or if he'd taken the blue pill, it would have allowed him to retain the illusion. Most of us are taking the blue pill. My course gives you the red pill. Right? The pill is one we choose to take every day. Now, like an antidepressant, you know, the things that we take to cope with reality. So from a political economic perspective, according to Marx, workers under capitalism don't recognize the relationship between their labor, their work, and the capital that they produce. They must accept the terms of their employment, which are dictated by the owners of capital. What's happening to if cells right now? Come on, it's the same thing. And I don't think it's controversial. I'm not saying that to say fire me. I'm not saying that. I'm just like, this is the reality that we're having to deal with. So Neo does recognize his mental imprisonment by taking the red pill. The film, interestingly, provides the experience. It changes the point of view. I don't know if anybody that has watched The Matrix has noticed this. Sometimes Neo talks to the camera. So it shatters the fourth wall. It makes you see reality in a different way. Usually actors never look at the camera. Have you realize that? Because it's all designed to actually not connect with you, basically. This technique calls into question the film of The Matrix itself being a type of matrix. That is, a simulation in which a fictional world is created from a fictional viewpoint, which is then lived vicariously by a subject. Towards the end of the film, Neo is able to manipulate the space around him by becoming spiritually connected to his mind. So just like the Truman Show, there's a kind of spiritual message, almost Buddhist, maybe even Christian. But why any kind of religious Christian message? It's transcendence. So he realizes, so when he becomes more connected to his mind, he's less physically dependent on the material world. The mass media in a commercial way is all material, yeah? So it's a different narrative. It's not your typical Hollywood narrative. Yeah, I think that's basically everything I want to say. Have we got any time for questions? Anybody have any quick questions?
Something popped up in my head at the beginning of the class when you mentioned Hollywood and their authority and supremacy, and I cannot help but think of, I'm so sorry to mention this, because it's very tragic, Jeffrey Epstein Island. It's disgusting, but for some reason that's the first thing that came up to mind, and because he was using a lot of physicists, which when you think like, why would they go to that island? They're very much invested in their labs. And then when I was like reading a lot about it and hearing those podcasts, they were mainly going to just get those financials to support their labs, and they're not going
to support their labs.
Yes, and their research.
Okay, I'm not actually familiar with that. That's news to me. So
because it's weird. Like a lot of physicists, one of which I'm not sure that was going because of that reason, but a lot of other physicists, they were going.
When you say physicists, you mean physicists?
Physicists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that. What is his name? Like Stephen Hawking. I'm not really sure if he's going for that specific reason, but there are other physicists that were going for that reason. But having that authority, having that, it's insane. Like he had Bill Clinton, and he had weird people.
So I think it's a really interesting point you're making, but I just want to be clear. How does that relate to Hollywood, do you think?
It's relatable in a way. They have control, whether it was with Disney, it was like their control is a bit different when it comes to like raping and doing like disgusting stuff. But using those authority people to help them do so. And I think Hollywood has kind of that same effect of...
Okay, so you're kind of saying that the disgusting sexual nature of Epstein and the group of people that were associated with him, which is basically paedophilia and sexual abuse, is a kind of more extreme, real version of what Hollywood is kind of promoting in, because you do get rape scenes in Hollywood, you get horrible violent scenes.
Right.
Yeah, I can see some kind of connection there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anybody else?
There was one point, and I don't think that there's enough time to tackle, but I think we should talk about in the seminar, which is the difference between the fantasy and the imagination.
Go ahead.
Because when we mentioned the Matrix, I'm not sure that I got actually where is like the main difference between them and how Hollywood support the fantasy part more than the imagination, how that shut down like a specific part of our mind.
So, I mean, what I would say, and I think you're absolutely right, it's really complex, but this is where the left brain, right brain thing really works for me. Because fantasy is, so remember the left brain only believes that the representation is the whole truth, the representation.
Yeah.
So the ideology is the whole truth. Capitalism is the whole truth. What Western culture is the whole truth. It fixes reality. So that is, I guess what I'm saying here is just basically Western culture as being superior is a massive fantasy. And Hollywood has become a machine to promote that fantasy. Not just Hollywood, but also it's going on in social media, it's going on reality TV and so on and so forth. So, and what's happening, it seems to me, that so many of us are getting confused between the fantasy and the reality. And we're not even testing the fantasy against the reality. We're too busy, we're too stressed, we're too unhappy and whatever. We want to escape into Hollywood to actually think, hang on a minute, that's not the world that I want to live in. That's not the world that I am living in. But we end up worrying so much about the real world that's all mediated because we don't really know the real world. And it's worse than that because the more we use the mass media, the more we actually, when we're looking at the real world in an imaginative way, in an open way, in a mindful way, in the moment, like now, we're just thinking with our left brains. We're only seeing what we've seen on a screen. We're not open to new experience. So this is why Western culture is in crisis, because it's saturated with fantasy, and the fantasy no longer works. And one of the major fantasies and myths was that capitalism was infinitely sustainable. And now we know, but if you look at the mass media, it's still trying to promote the myth, okay, GDP is really important, stock exchange is really important. No, actually, there's a bigger thing here. So, yes, that's the matrix. How no one is outside the matrix. Even when we're talking like this, I'm not outside the matrix, you're not outside the matrix. But how you attend to the matrix, the media, the mass media, will change what you see. Yeah? And as long as you see that you're being manipulated, that your left brain's being manipulated, it's exciting. Something opens up to you. And that's why I use the matrix. and The Truman Show, because I think the central characters are kind of showing us that. That's I think what that's trying to do. So I wanted to be positive, not rather than just saying that, you know, everything is gloom and doom.
100%. And I think, let me know if I'm wrong, The Matrix was a clear representation of also, like, when you've mentioned, like, the spiritual part is we all live, we can go to the same exact place and live the exact same life, if that was the case, but we can have different experiences based on how we view the world and just how we think about it. So it's how you think basically creates your reality in a way.
Absolutely,
Which is
because we are constantly told that we have no control over our reality.
Exactly.
Hollywood films say, you know, politics is rubbish. It's like, you know, don't worry, you know, power will always, you know, goodness will always. No, that's not what's happening.
Exactly.
We are losing touch with what's really the most important thing about being human, which is being kind and compassionate and open.
Right.
We're losing that because the media is making us cynical and afraid and closing us down.
100%.
But anyway, let's stop that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And yes, do you want to switch? Stop it. So.